Modules 12 and 13 have been combined because they're both about unemployment. What is included, who counts as unemployed, and then the three types of unemployment. Unemployment is an economic indicator because this entire unit is about what measures can we look at to see where we are in the business cycle and the health of the economy. Unemployment rates tend to go up during a recession, so that tells you where we are in the business cycle. In this model, all of the purple zones show rising rates of unemployment. And you can see that unemployment goes up, which marks a recession, then it goes back down again, a recovery period. The large purple section to the right is for the Great Recession that started in 2008. So this is a longer recession, and you can tell that the unemployment rate rose for a longer period of time as well. Who actually counts as unemployed is very important. Just because you don't have a job doesn't mean that you're technically unemployed. To be unemployed, you have to meet certain criteria. The first one is that you have to be 16 years old or older. Now that's in America. Different countries have different ages that they expect people to be able to work. But in America, it's 16. Below 16, you can get a working permit. But at 16, you're able to do a lot of jobs. So if you are 15 and not working, we don't count you. So the next step, once you're 16 or older, you have to be available and able to work. So if you are handicapped in some way, you have maybe a disability that makes you unable to work, we don't count you as unemployed. And you have to have made an effort. You have to have shown that you're looking for a job. Because what about retired people? They're over 16, maybe they're able to work, but they don't want to. If they're not looking for a job, we don't count you. This is also true for stay-at-home parents, or maybe someone who has a trust fund and just doesn't need to work. If you're not looking for a job, we don't count you as unemployed. And then finally, you have to have worked for less than 1 hour to count as unemployed. So saying that you're a part-time worker and you wish you got more hours at your job, that doesn't count as unemployed. You have to have worked for less than 1 hour to count. So blue are kind of the normal criteria for counting as unemployed. Green is one more exception that also fits this. So or you just recently got laid off. So you've been fired within that 4-week window and you haven't started looking at put in resumes, gone to interviews yet, but your firing or laid off was recent, then we count you as well. Once you've been fired for a while, if you're not looking for a new job, then we no longer count you in the unemployed numbers. You have some practice questions of who counts as unemployed in your notes. Go ahead and pause this, answer them on your own, and then go back through and we'll check your answers. Okay, so the first one said, what about retired persons? Do they count as unemployed? The answer is no. The reason retired people don't count is that they're not looking for work. That's the criteria that makes them not count. Disabled people who cannot work, they don't count as unemployed because they're unable to work. Older workers who were laid off and gave up looking, they don't count either because they're not looking. We call those people discouraged workers. Discouraged workers are people that were in the labor force, and then when they got fired, they were unable to find a new job, and then they eventually just stopped looking. They're discouraged. Discouraged workers are not part of unemployment rate, but when the economy starts to turn around and improve, they're going to start looking for work again. Next one, workers who aren't working full-time. No, we do not count them as unemployed. As long as they're working part-time, at least 1 hour a week, they count. And then workers who aren't using their degrees, are they unemployed? No, we call this underemployed. These are people that might have jobs, but they're not using what they've been trained to do, but they still are employed. Now we know who's unemployed. So to be employed, all you have to do is work at least 1 hour per week. That's it. We don't care how old you are. We don't care if it's part-time, if it's full-time, if it's using your degree or not. What's interesting, if you think about it, is that the unemployment rate is really a very political number, that politicians want to appear that the unemployment rate is going down. So in order to count as unemployed, they want that to be kind of difficult. But counting someone as employed, they want to be as simple as possible, have as many people count as employed as you can. Now, it's important to know the equation for labor force. It's a very easy equation. Labor force is all the people that are employed plus everyone that's unemployed. Now, that doesn't mean that the total population is the labor force. These are different numbers. There's a lot of people, there's millions of people in America that are not in the labor force. Maybe they're under the age of 16. Maybe they're retired. Maybe they're choosing not to work or they're unable to work. The labor force also is called the civilian labor force because we don't count people in the military. They're in a different labor force. We don't count people in prison. So labor force is just everybody who counts as employed and everybody that counts as unemployed. You're going to need that labor force equation in other equations to come. So here we have two really important equations that you'll need within unemployment. The first one is the labor force participation rate. We just found out what the labor force is. It's everyone that is unemployed plus everyone that is employed. Now, if you take those people, the labor force, and you divide it by everybody who is 16 years or older and civilian, because again, not counting the military, we're going to see what percent of America that can work is working. This is important for us to know if we have efficiency in our labor force. So if you have a lot of those discouraged workers, those people that gave up looking for a job, they're not going to count as employed or unemployed. They wouldn't count in either. So the labor force participation rate would be lower. People like talking about this number when they're saying, okay, unemployment's only 5%, but our labor force participation rate is down. That's a bad thing. We want it to be a reasonably high number, but usually good labor force participation is around 70% because you have all of those people that are too young, too old, or are choosing not to work, and they wouldn't have a job if you forced them to have a job. So this is never going to be 100%. The next equation is the unemployment rate. So all you do here is you take the number of people that are unemployed and you divide it by the civilian labor force. So you'll need to add employed and unemployed to get the labor force, and then you just do unemployed by that number, and then you'll see what percent of our country is unemployed at any given time. Go ahead and do these three practice problems. You may use a calculator if you need to for these. So answer them and then we'll check over your work. Okay, hopefully you pause the video. Let's go over the right answers. So what is the size of the labor force? So the first thing you do is determine which things in this table help me answer that question. The labor force equation is unemployed plus employed. So number of people working part-time, we need that. That is employed. Unemployed, and then number of people working full-time. We need that one. So 1 plus 1 plus 4 equals 6 million. So that's the size of the labor force. For the labor force participation rate, that is the labor force, which we've already calculated, the 6 million, divided by the population, the civilian population under the age of 16. So 6 million divided by 12 million, but we want it to be in a percentage. So when you do that times 100, it'll give you 50%, because 6 divided by 12 is 0.5 times 100, 50%. So that means that half the people that can work are working. And then finally, for the unemployment rate, that equation is the number unemployed divided by the labor force, which we found up here. So 1 divided by 6, that one you might have needed a calculator for. times 100 is 16 point, and you probably saw 6666 repeated 6 number. You can round that to 0.7, so 16.7%. So you saw how it's very difficult to count someone as unemployed. And because of this, there's going to be various limitations to the unemployment rate. In other words, you might see that unemployment rate is 10%, but it's not really showing some other problems within the labor market like these criteria that we see. So the first one that is not fully demonstrated by the unemployment rate is the number of discouraged workers. I talked about these a little bit earlier. These are people who have stopped looking for jobs. They're old enough to work, they're able to work, but maybe the economy's been bad for a while and they feel like none of their jobs exist anyway, so they're not even going to try. We wouldn't count them as unemployed if they're not actively looking for a job, but are they working? Are they contributing to the economy? No, and that's not fully shown by the unemployment rate. You would need to look at the labor force participation rate to get a sense of how many people are discouraged workers that have stopped even trying. The next thing is part-time work or underemployment. These are two different things, but both of them are for people who maybe want to work more or want to have a better job than they do. So they have a job, but maybe they wish it was full-time so they could get some health benefits, but their employer won't give them full-time work. Or maybe they're underemployed, which is when they're not using their degree or their skills. So if a PhD is working a minimum wage job, that's underemployment. That person wouldn't count as unemployed, though, so we wouldn't see them on the unemployment rate. Next category, undocumented labor or non-market labor. So this is people that are working under the table. In other words, people whose income is not being reported as taxes. And this is not necessarily something sinister. If you do a lot of babysitting or mowing lawns and you're not reporting your income, then you technically are undocumented labor. And we really have no sense of people that aren't reporting their labor in the unemployment rate. And the last thing that we can't see by the unemployment rate is the working conditions. So maybe it looks like everybody is working and your unemployment's really, really low, but if they're working in really poor labor conditions, we of course can't see that through the unemployment rate. So is it a useful measure? Yes, but it does have some flaws. Knowing that the unemployment rate only shows part of the picture, this table is showing us at the bottom in orange is showing just the unemployment rate by itself. Then when you add discouraged workers, the people that did have a job, but when they got laid off, were not able to find work, so they stopped trying, then the rate goes up a little bit. When you add marginally attached workers, these are people that are sometimes in the labor market, so sometimes they might have temporary jobs, seasonal jobs, so they're working sometimes, not working other times. That makes the unemployment rate go higher. And then involuntary part-time workers, these are people that wish they could have a full-time job with the benefits, but maybe they're only getting 12 hours of week on each shift, then this is going to make the actual unemployment rate much, much higher. So unemployment rate itself, you can see that it does show us when it's going down, the other ones are going down as well. When it goes up, everything is going up. So it still is valuable to show us, generally speaking, how we're doing on the business cycle, but it's only part of the story. We've seen that the unemployment rate has limitations and it underrepresents certain categories of people that either aren't working or maybe they are working but not in the type of job that they would like to be. The unemployment rate also only shows you this average for the nation. If our unemployment rate is 7%, that doesn't mean that it's 7% for every demographic group in America. There are different rates for different age groups. So people that, for example, get laid off in their 50s or at an older age have a much harder time finding a job. Also, young people looking for work without any experience in their field are going to have higher unemployment rates than people in their quote-unquote productive years, the middle-aged groups. Also, unemployment rates are different for different races, and this represents differences in hiring practices. And our country is imperfect. There are still issues that affirmative action and things like that are trying to address. But if we're not hiring people equally for different jobs, if people don't have the same job training, the same access to education, the same amount of college degrees, all of those things are going to lead to differences in actual employment opportunities for races, genders, ages, all of those things. Next, we're going to talk about the three major types of unemployment. They're frictional, structural, and cyclical. You're going to find out what's included in each of those categories, what the subcategories are, and which of these types of unemployment are considered normal in a strong economy, and which ones are signs that we're definitely in a recession. So the first type is frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is temporary. We expect some people to be unemployed. There's lots of very normal reasons why somebody might be unemployed. Maybe they are in between jobs. So you just started looking. And theoretically, especially at higher income levels and jobs that require more experience, more training, it's going to take you a couple of weeks to find a job. So someone who's in between jobs and just doesn't want to take the very first thing that they find is going to be frictionally unemployed. And that doesn't mean that our economy is bad. This also includes recent graduates. So anyone who's just entering the labor market, they're going to have a harder time finding a job than someone else. Anyone who just began their job search, or people that recently moved. So maybe someone moves to a new city because their spouse got a new job or they got transferred. Well, the second person might take a little bit of time to find a new job. That's frictional. There's other types of expected unemployments. We expect some stores to fail. If you open up a restaurant and the food or the service is poor, or you are the 14th coffee shop in town, it's possible that that business will go out of business. That doesn't mean that we have a poor economy. So I keep hitting that. Frictional is normal. This is expected. We're never going to have 0% unemployment because some businesses are going to fail. Some people are going to decide they want to change jobs, and it might take them some time to switch careers. So all of that is normal and healthy in an economy. The subcategory of frictional, temporary, normal unemployment is seasonal unemployment. So kind of a funny example would be mall Santas. We expect mall Santas to be looking for a new job in January. That's totally normal. That doesn't mean we're in a recession. Same with maybe they become mall Easter bunnies later on, but there's going to be a time where they're unemployed. Also, many lifeguards might be seasonally unemployed as that job ends while they're looking for another job. Or a migrant worker, someone who's traveling around because they're harvesting crops. Well, crops are harvestable, if that's the right word, at different times of the year. They are ripe for harvest. So those people, as they're moving around looking for work, we expect them to be unemployed between jobs. So all of those are frictional unemployment. The second type of unemployment is structural unemployment. There's two major S words I want you to think of when you think of structural: surplus and skills. So when you see a structural unemployment, definitely think of those two things. So this is the idea that some skills become outdated. They become obsolete. So the VCR repairman. Very few people have VCRs these days. So it's actually a sign that our economy is growing and developing, and we're coming up with new technologies, or maybe we're coming up with ways that some jobs are done by machines. And those people that used to do it by hand, either their jobs have been completely replaced by machines, or there's not very many jobs left. So when those skills become outdated, that creates a surplus of workers. Idea being, there's a lot more people who want to do the job and are able to do the job than jobs in those fields. People that sold payphones. At the bottom, we see if you were someone who repaired or maintained carriages. There's probably a few jobs in that field, maybe Colonial Williamsburg, some places like that, working on movie sets. You might use that field, but there's very few jobs. So when the jobs get shrunk, that's going to create a surplus of workers. Being technologically unemployed just means that new technologies have replaced that job, and so now people aren't doing things the way they used to be done. We're going to take a moment and focus on labor surpluses and labor shortages. The only part that goes in your notes is the part in red at the bottom, but I want us to see how the concept of shortages and surpluses also applies to unemployment and the labor market. So if the price of labor, or the wage rate, is below equilibrium, so I'm going to draw a line here below equilibrium, that means wages are really, really low. So the demand for labor is high. Firms would love to pay people not very much, but the supply of labor from workers is lower. They don't want to work. There are some people who might work for a lower wage, but very few do. So when demand exceeds supply, you have a labor shortage because not very many people want to work for that low price. If the price of labor is above equilibrium, as this model already shows, the demand is low. Companies that demand labor don't want to pay the high prices. Some will have to, so there is some demand, but it's less. The supply of labor is high. Lots of workers would love to get paid at that higher rate. So when supply exceeds demand, you have a surplus. So we saw that structural unemployment can create a labor surplus, but here's two more situations that can create the same problem. The minimum wage. That is, a little review, is the minimum wage a price ceiling or a price floor? Remember, anything above equilibrium is trying to go down, and if you're getting hit by something below you, it's a floor. Okay, so minimum wage, that price floor, creates a labor surplus because there's going to be fewer jobs. See how the quantity demanded here is less than the quantity it would be at equilibrium. So this is the amount of jobs that actually exist because they're demanded by companies that are going to pay those people. So minimum wage means that people that do have jobs get paid more, but there are fewer jobs. The other thing that could create this is a labor union. Labor unions work for higher wages for their employees, but if the wage that they agree upon is higher than equilibrium wage, it's also going to create a surplus of labor. A lot more workers that would love to work for that price than companies that are willing to pay them that much. The final type of unemployment is cyclical unemployment. And this is unemployment that is caused by an economic downturn. The recession caused the unemployment. That's why it's called cyclical, because it's tied to the business cycle. So this is the one type that is not normal, that's not good. Frictional, we expect some people to be unemployed. Structural, that means our economy is actually growing and expanding and creating new technologies, and those people will just have to learn new skills to keep up. Cyclical is bad. It's showing that our economy is starting to struggle. We're going through a downturn, and so people are getting fired. One of the major types of unemployment that's cyclical is construction labor, because a lot of times, especially new home construction, is going to just stop because those people that are building homes are afraid that no one's going to be able to buy a house, or they're going to think this is a bad time to buy a house, and those companies don't want to be sitting on inventories of unsold homes. Kind of a funny example of cyclical unemployment would be people that renovate yachts. It's a very small field, not a lot of those people. But think about it. If you are wealthy enough to own a yacht and decide that you want it to be renovated, that you want whole new carpet or cabinets on your yacht, you're probably going to do that when the economy is strong and you feel like you have a lot of money coming in. If you're experiencing a recession, you're going to cut back on unnecessary spending. And renovating your yacht definitely falls within unnecessary spending. So there's certain jobs that we can see will show us really early on that a recession might be on the horizon. Okay, go ahead and work on the practice problems, seeing which type of unemployment each of those scenarios fit. There's no trick questions, they're all just one thing. So go ahead and go over those practice questions, and then we'll check over your work. Let's go over the practice questions. A computer programmer is laid off because of a recession. That one is cyclical. The recession part gives it away. Number 2, a literary editor leaves her job in New York to look for a new job in San Francisco. That one is frictional. Totally normal. She chose to move. That job is expected. 3, an unemployed college graduate is looking for his first job. That one is frictional. New graduates are frictional. 4, advances in technology make the assembly line worker's job obsolete. That one falls under structural because it is the skills that made it that their job is no longer necessary. 5, slumping sales lead to the cashier being laid off. Cyclical, so that is tied to the business cycle. It is not the skills of the employee, it is the fact that the economy itself has turned. 6, a high school graduate lacks the skills necessary for a particular job. That one is structural because it is the skills. 7, workers are laid off when the local manufacturing plant closes because the product made there isn't selling. That one is cyclical. You could also think maybe that was frictional because of the fact that that's a normal thing, that if the product is no longer desired in the economy, it's going to go out of business. So that one you could put in either category, frictional as well. And 8, a skilled glassblower becomes unemployed when a new machine does her job faster. That one is structural because she's been technologically replaced. Her skills were outdated. I hope by this point you've realized that we're never going to have 0% unemployment. There's lots of unemployment that's normal and expected in our economy, either from people that are choosing not to work, they've recently moved, or they have outdated skills and just need to take some more classes and keep their material and their information up to date to get a new job in this economy. So the natural rate of unemployment is jobs for all that want them and are qualified to do them. Natural rate of unemployment stands for NRU, and there's two things in the equation here. Natural rate of unemployment is structural unemployment plus frictional unemployment, not cyclical. Cyclical is not normal. It is not a natural rate. That says that there's something happening, a downturn in our economy. Now, natural rate of unemployment is also called full employment. Anytime you hear full employment, nobody's saying 0% unemployment. In America, the natural rate or the full employment rate is 4 to 6%. That's what's normal for us. But different countries have different normal ranges based on the specifics of their job market. So if we're in the 4 to 6% range, that tells us that the only unemployment we have is probably structural and frictional. There's no cyclical unemployment, therefore we're doing very well, and that tells us that we are probably in a recovery or expansion part of the business cycle. And that's how you can use the unemployment rate as an economic indicator to tell you how our economy is doing.